The last bell of the day echoed through the quiet halls like the release of a long-held breath. Students flooded out of classrooms, voices buzzing with excitement for the weekend. I moved slower than the rest, sliding my notebook into my bag, pretending to finish some notes I didn't really need. I wasn't in a rush. The truth was, I had a reason for lingering. A reason that made my pulse quicken even as I forced myself to look casual. Her. Ms. Carter. She wasn't the kind of teacher you forgot, not just because of her sharp intelligence, but because she carried herself in a way that made everyone around her pay attention. She wasn't loud, she didn't need to be. When she walked into a room, it felt as though the atmosphere bent slightly, adjusting itself to her presence. 35, maybe 36. Long dark hair usually tied back in a neat bun during the day, though I had once glimpsed it loose, cascading down her back when I stayed late after class. That image haunted me ever since. How different she looked when she wasn't framed by the authority of the classroom. I was 20. Old enough to know better, young enough to not care. As the hallway thinned out, I deliberately dropped a pen under my desk, crouching down to buy time. When I sat back up, the room was almost empty except for her. "Mr. Miller," she said, adjusting a stack of essays on her desk without looking at me. "Still here?" I swallowed, forcing myself to speak with a voice steadier than I felt. "Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I understood the assignment." She lifted her gaze then, those sharp hazel eyes narrowing slightly, assessing me in a way that always made me feel both exposed and challenged. She had a way of making silence work for her, stretching moments until you filled them with nervous words. "Well," she said finally, "it's good you care enough to ask." Her lips curved, not quite a smile, but not dismissive either. Something in between. I stepped closer, handing her my notebook. She leaned forward to look, her hair slipping loose from the bun, a single strand falling along her cheek. My fingers itched with the absurd desire to tuck it back, to feel the softness between my knuckles. "Your writing shows potential," she said, her tone clinical, professional. But her pause lingered. "But you hold back. You censor yourself. Afraid of what people will think." I wasn't sure if she meant the essay or me. Maybe both. My chest tightened as I met her eyes. "Maybe I am." She tilted her head, studying me. And then, just like that, she returned to the pile of essays. The moment was gone, or maybe she had never intended there to be one. "Don't hold back. Not in writing, not in life," she said briskly. "That's the only way to be taken seriously." The words struck deeper than they should have. I packed my things and left, but her voice followed me out of the classroom, echoing in my head all the way home. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, replaying every detail of the encounter. The way her eyes had lingered just a fraction longer than necessary. The softness of her voice when she told me not to hold back. It wasn't much. Just fragments. But to me, it was everything. And then there was the memory of a week earlier, when I'd passed her office door and seen her with another teacher, a woman closer to her age. The door was slightly ajar, and though their conversation was hushed, there was a closeness in their posture, a familiarity that felt almost intimate. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but I froze, watching. Ms. Carter's hand brushed the other woman's arm, lingering in a way that was not strictly professional. My stomach had tightened then, a strange mix of jealousy and curiosity rising in me. Who was she outside of the classroom? And why did I want so badly to find out? The following week, fate handed me an opportunity. I had left my jacket behind in class. When I returned in the evening to get it, the building was mostly dark. The custodian's carts lined the hall, the sound of a vacuum buzzing in the distance. Her door was open. Inside, she sat at her desk, reading a book that wasn't school-related. A glass of red wine rested beside her hand, the rich smell carrying faintly into the hall. I hesitated at the threshold, my heart pounding. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face before softening. "Mr. Miller. You're out late." "I forgot my jacket," I said, holding it up awkwardly as proof. She leaned back, gesturing toward the empty chair across from her. "Well, since you're here." I froze. Was this an invitation? She studied me again, that same unreadable gaze. The kind that seemed to peel back layers. "Sit," she said finally. Not a suggestion, an instruction. I obeyed. For a few moments, the room was quiet except for the sound of pages turning. She sipped her wine, her lips leaving a faint trace of red against the glass. "Do you always do what you're told?" she asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. "Not always." Her brow arched. "But you did just now." I shifted in my seat, heat creeping into my chest. There was a teasing edge to her words, something sharp beneath the casual tone. "Maybe I wanted to," I admitted. Her eyes glittered, amused. "Careful, Mr. Miller. That sounds dangerously close to flirting." I swallowed hard, pulse racing. "Maybe it is." The silence that followed was heavy, electric. She didn't break eye contact, and for a moment, I thought I saw something flicker there, interest, maybe even hunger. But just as quickly, it was gone. "You're too young to know what you want," she said softly, almost to herself. Then, louder, "Go home. It's late." I stood, but her words stayed with me, twisting inside my chest. Too young to know what I want? No, I knew exactly what I wanted. Over the next few days, the tension built like a storm. Every class, every glance felt charged. I caught her looking at me more than once, though she always looked away before I could be certain. And then came the moment that changed everything. It was Friday evening. I had volunteered to help sort books in the library, and when I walked in, she was already there. Alone. "Looks like it's just us," she said, almost amused. I forced a smile. "Guess so." For the next hour, we worked in near silence, stacking and organizing. But every time our hands brushed over the same book, my pulse jumped. Every time she leaned in close, I caught the faint scent of her perfume, subtle but intoxicating. At one point, she reached up to place a book on a high shelf, her blouse riding up slightly, revealing a glimpse of skin at her waist. My throat went dry. She noticed. Her eyes flicked down to me, catching the way I stared. Instead of scolding, she let the silence stretch, her lips curving in the faintest of smiles. "You're distracted," she murmured. I forced myself to meet her gaze. "Maybe you're the distraction." Her breath caught, almost imperceptibly. And then she stepped closer, close enough that I felt the warmth of her body. "You have no idea what you're playing with," she whispered. But I did. And for the first time, I sensed something dangerous, something thrilling. She wasn't just a teacher. She wasn't just older. She was a woman who liked control. And maybe, just maybe, she wanted someone willing to give it to her. The following Monday, I walked into class with a weight on my chest. Part of me expected her to act like nothing had happened in the library. Another part of me feared she would call me out in front of everyone, expose the subtle game we had started. But Ms. Carter was the same as always, composed, sharp, untouchable. She moved through the lecture with practiced ease, never letting her gaze linger on me for too long, never giving anyone reason to suspect that anything had shifted. And yet, every word, every glance carried an undercurrent only I could feel. When she called my name to answer a question, her tone had the faintest edge of challenge, as if daring me to falter. When I returned my answer with confidence, I caught the flicker of something in her eyes, approval, maybe, or amusement. It was unbearable, this push and pull. I wanted more. After class, I lingered again, heart hammering as the last students filed out. She noticed, of course. She always noticed. "Mr. Miller," she said, placing her chalk down carefully. "Do you ever go home?" I smirked, masking the nerves twisting in my stomach. "Maybe I like it here." Her lips curved slightly. "Careful. People might start to think you're obsessed." "Maybe I am," I replied before I could stop myself. The silence stretched. She tilted her head, studying me, and for a second, the mask slipped. There was a flash of hunger in her eyes, undeniable, raw. Then the mask was back. "Bring me your essay draft tomorrow," she said briskly, gathering her papers. "We'll discuss it after hours." That night, I barely slept. It wasn't the essay I was thinking about. It was her words, "after hours." The phrase carried a weight, a promise. I showed up the next day with my essay draft in hand, my nerves frayed but my resolve steady. When the last bell rang, I walked to her office, every step echoing like a countdown. The door was open. She sat at her desk, glasses perched on her nose, her blouse slightly undone at the collar. She didn't look up when I entered, only gestured for me to sit. For the next 30 minutes, we discussed my work. Or rather, she dissected it with sharp precision, pointing out every flaw, every hesitation. "You still hold back," she said finally, setting the pages down. "You write like you're afraid someone will judge you. Afraid of being exposed." Her eyes flicked up to meet mine, and the air between us shifted. "Are you afraid of being exposed, Mr. Miller?" I swallowed hard, the meaning beneath her words cutting straight through me. "No," I said quietly. "Not with you." The corner of her mouth twitched. She leaned back, crossing her legs slowly, deliberately. "Brave words," she murmured. "But words are easy. Action is harder." My pulse thundered. I wanted to move closer, to prove I wasn't just talk. But before I could, a knock sounded at the door. "Come in," she called, her tone instantly professional again. The door opened, and my stomach tightened. It was the woman I had seen with her before, the one from the office. She was striking, with sharp cheekbones and a confident stride, her blonde hair tied loosely at her shoulders. She carried herself with the same authority as Miss Carter, though hers felt more playful, almost mischievous. "Am I interrupting?" she asked, her voice smooth. "Not at all," Miss Carter replied. "Mr. Miller was just leaving." I froze. Leaving? But Miss Carter's eyes flicked to me, and there was something in them, something that told me this wasn't dismissal. This was a test. Slowly, I stood. "See you tomorrow, Miss Carter," I said, forcing my voice steady. She gave a curt nod. The other woman's eyes followed me as I left, curious, assessing. For the rest of the week, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Not just Miss Carter, but the other woman too. Who was she? What was their relationship? Every detail I replayed made me more certain, there was something between them. Something intimate, hidden. And if I was right, then maybe, just maybe, I was being pulled into it. On Friday, my suspicions were confirmed. I had stayed late again, pretending to work on an assignment in the library. The halls were nearly empty when I heard voices down the corridor. I followed the sound quietly until I reached Miss Carter's office. The door was mostly closed, but not all the way. Through the gap, I saw them. Miss Carter and the blonde woman. The blonde leaned against the desk, smiling wickedly. "You're playing with fire, you know," she teased. Miss Carter's lips curved faintly. "Maybe I like the heat." The blonde laughed softly, then reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind Miss Carter's ear with a tenderness that made my chest ache. I should have walked away. But I couldn't. I was rooted to the spot, heart pounding, breath shallow. And then, as if sensing me, Miss Carter's eyes flicked toward the door. Directly toward me. Our gazes locked. She didn't move. Didn't call me out. Didn't expose me. She simply held my gaze, her expression unreadable, until I finally forced myself to step back, retreating into the shadows. The weekend was torture. I replayed that moment over and over. She had seen me. She knew I was there. And she hadn't stopped me. Which meant, what? That she wanted me to see? That she wanted me to know? By Monday morning, I was restless, half out of my mind. When I walked into class, she was as composed as ever, but when her eyes met mine, there was something different there. A spark. A secret we now shared. After class, she didn't even give me a chance to linger. "Mr. Miller," she said briskly, gathering her things. "Stay after school today. I have something for you." My pulse jumped. "Yes, Miss Carter." The hours crawled by until the final bell. I walked to her office, every nerve on edge. The door was open again, but this time, she wasn't alone. The blonde woman was there too, perched casually on the edge of the desk, her eyes gleaming with amusement when she saw me. "Ah," she said, smiling. "So this is the famous Mr. Miller." My stomach tightened. Famous. Ms. Carter's expression was unreadable. "This is my colleague, Ms. Lane," she said smoothly. "Colleague?" Ms. Lane repeated with a laugh, glancing at her. "Is that what we're calling it?" Ms. Carter shot her a look, but it wasn't anger, it was something else. Something charged. I stood frozen, unsure what to do. Ms. Lane's gaze swept over me, slow and deliberate, like she was cataloging every detail. "He's cute," she said finally. "Brave, too, if he's still standing here." Ms. Carter folded her arms, her eyes never leaving mine. "The question is, does he know what he's getting himself into?" The room went silent. I swallowed hard, my voice low but steady. "Maybe I want to find out." Their eyes met Ms. Carter and Ms. Lane as if sharing a private conversation without words. Then, almost imperceptibly, Ms. Carter nodded. And just like that, I knew. This was no longer about essays, or after-hours tutoring. This was something else. Something dangerous. Something I couldn't turn away from. The office door shut behind me with a soft click. The sound echoed in my chest like a lock turning. Ms. Carter stood by her desk, arms crossed, her gaze sharp and unwavering. Ms. Lane perched casually on the corner of the desk, her legs crossed, one heel dangling lazily as she studied me like a puzzle she was eager to solve. The air between the three of us felt heavy, charged. "Close the blinds," Ms. Carter said, her tone even but leaving no room for argument. I hesitated only a second before obeying. The late afternoon sunlight dimmed, the room settling into a softer, more intimate glow. When I turned back, both women were watching me. "You see," Ms. Lane said, smirking. "He listens." Ms. Carter's eyes flicked to her. "Don't encourage him." "Why not?" "He likes being told what to do." I felt my cheeks heat, though I didn't deny it. Because the truth was she was right. Ms. Carter stepped closer, her heels clicking against the floor, each step deliberate. She stopped just in front of me, her hazel eyes searching mine. "Mr. Miller," she said softly, but with steel beneath it. "Do you know why you're here?" I swallowed. "Because you asked me to stay." Her lips curved faintly, though not into a smile. That's the simple answer. But not the real one. My pulse thudded in my ears. "Then tell me the real one." Her gaze sharpened, and for a moment, I thought she might dismiss me, laugh at my boldness. Instead, she leaned in just slightly, her voice lowering. "Because you can't stop looking. And because I don't stop you." The words hit me like a current. She had noticed every glance, every stolen moment. And she had allowed it? Ms. Lane let out a soft chuckle. "He's blushing." "Adorable." Ms. Carter ignored her. "This isn't a game, Mr. Miller. If you stay, things will change." I drew in a shaky breath. "Maybe I want them to." For the first time, her mask cracked just enough to show something else, a spark of hunger, sharp and dangerous. "Careful," she whispered. "Wanting is easy. Obeying, that's harder." The next hour blurred into something I could hardly define. They didn't touch me, not really. But every word, every look wound tighter around me like invisible chains. Ms. Carter asked questions with the precision of a blade. "Do you always follow orders? Do you enjoy the feeling of being corrected? Do you crave approval?" Each one left me raw, exposed. Ms. Lane played the opposite role, teasing, coaxing, leaning in too close just to see me squirm. At one point, she reached for my notebook, flipping through the pages of half-written drafts. "He censors himself," she said, echoing Ms. Carter's earlier critique. "Hides behind safe words. But I bet he's not nearly as innocent as he looks." Her eyes flicked up, daring me to prove her right. I met her gaze, my voice low. "I'm not." Her smile widened. "Oh, I like him." Ms. Carter's voice cut through the air, cool and commanding. "Enough." The word froze us both. Ms. Lane raised her hands in mock surrender, though her smirk never faded. That was the moment I understood. Ms. Lane liked to play, but Ms. Carter ruled the game. And I wanted to play by her rules. By the time they dismissed me, my head was spinning. I walked home in a haze, my body thrumming with a mix of adrenaline and longing. They hadn't laid a hand on me, and yet it felt more intimate than anything I had ever experienced. That night, I couldn't focus on anything else. I imagined what might come next, how far they would push me, how far I would let myself go. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just chasing Ms. Carter. I was being pulled into something larger. Something I couldn't quite name yet. The next meeting came quicker than I expected. Wednesday, after class, Ms. Carter called my name as students packed up. "Stay a moment." My pulse jumped. I waited as the room emptied, trying not to look too eager. She handed me a slip of paper. An address. A time. "Tomorrow evening," she said simply. My throat went dry. "At your house." Her eyes flashed. "Don't assume." But when I showed up at the address the next night, it was exactly that. The house was modest but elegant, tucked on a quiet street. I hesitated on the doorstep before knocking. The door opened, and Ms. Lane stood there, her lips curving into a sly smile. "Well, well." He came. She stepped aside, motioning me in. The air inside smelled faintly of wine and perfume, warm and inviting. Ms. Carter was in the living room, wearing something casual, dark jeans, a silk blouse, but even dressed down, she radiated authority. She looked up from her glass of wine, her eyes lingering on me in a way that made my chest tighten. "Right on time," she said. Ms. Lane handed me a drink before I could respond. "Loosen up, sweetheart. You look like you're about to sit for an exam." I managed a weak laugh, but she wasn't wrong. Every nerve in my body was on fire. We sat together, the conversation starting light: books, classes, music. But beneath it all, the tension simmered. At one point, Ms. Lane leaned over, brushing my arm with hers. "He's nervous," she said, amused. "He should be," Ms. Carter replied. Her tone was calm, but the weight of her gaze made me shiver. The night deepened. The wine softened my edges, though not my awareness. At some point, Ms. Carter set her glass down and stood. She moved behind me, her hand resting briefly on my shoulder just enough to make my breath catch. "You say you're not afraid," she murmured. "But fear and desire look very similar." My voice shook. "Which one do you think it is?" Her hand squeezed lightly, just enough pressure to make me sit straighter. "Both," she whispered. Ms. Lane chuckled, swirling her wine. "He's trembling." "I'm not," I protested weakly. But Ms. Carter's hand tightened again. "You are." And she was right. My whole body buzzed with anticipation and nerves, caught between wanting to flee and wanting to surrender completely. The night ended with no grand climax, only words, commands, subtle touches that lingered long after I left. But that was enough. More than enough. Because I realized something as I walked home under the cool night air. They weren't just testing me. They were training me. The next few days passed in a blur. Classes felt like a cover, a performance where Ms. Carter and I pretended to be teacher and student while the truth simmered just beneath the surface. Every glance was a message. Every silence, a challenge. By Friday, my nerves were stretched thin. I knew something was coming. And I was right. After the last bell, she called my name, her tone calm, controlled. "Mr. Miller." "Stay a moment." I lingered as the room emptied, my pulse hammering. She didn't look up from her papers until the door closed behind the last student. Then her eyes lifted to mine. Sharp. Calculated. "Tonight. Same address. Don't be late." That was all. No explanation, no softness. Just an order. And God help me, I loved it. When I arrived at her house, the lights were low, the air warm with the scent of wine and something richer, muskier. Ms. Lane greeted me at the door again, her smile wicked. "Right on time. Good boy." The words sent a shiver down my spine, though I tried to mask it. She led me inside. Ms. Carter waited in the living room, dressed in black, simple, elegant, but with an edge that made my throat dry. She didn't smile when she saw me. "Sit." I obeyed without hesitation, sinking into the chair opposite her. Ms. Lane perched on the armrest, swirling a glass of wine, her eyes gleaming with amusement. "You're awfully quiet," she teased. I swallowed. "I'm just waiting." "For what?" she pressed. I glanced at Ms. Carter. "For whatever she decides." The words hung in the air, heavy, undeniable. Ms. Carter's lips curved, not quite a smile, but close. "At least he learns quickly." The next hour tested me in ways I hadn't expected. It wasn't about physical touch, not yet. It was about control. They asked questions, demanded honesty, pushed me to admit things I'd never said aloud. What I wanted. What I feared. Where my boundaries lay. Ms. Carter's voice was calm, clinical at times, but laced with something darker. Every time I hesitated, she cut through me with a single look. "Answer," she commanded. And I did. Ms. Lane was different, teasing, coaxing, laughing softly when I stumbled. She leaned close, whispering in my ear just to watch me squirm, her perfume dizzying. Together, they unraveled me. Piece by piece. Until I was raw, exposed, trembling not from fear, but from the unbearable mix of anticipation and desire. At one point, Ms. Carter stood, circling behind me. I felt her presence, the air shift with her nearness. "Do you trust me?" she asked, her voice low. "Yes." Her hand brushed my shoulder, light, fleeting, but electric. Enough to obey. My chest tightened. "Yes." The silence stretched, thick with meaning. Then, without warning, she placed a silk scarf in my lap. "Give me your hands." I hesitated only a second before lifting them. She tied my wrists together with practiced ease, the knot firm but not painful. The simple act sent a jolt through me, my breath quickening. Ms. Lane let out a delighted laugh. "Oh, he looks good like that." She leaned down, her lips brushing my ear. "You like this, don't you?" I couldn't deny it. "Yes." Ms. Carter's voice cut in, steady and commanding. "Look at me when you answer." I lifted my gaze to hers. "Yes." Her eyes darkened, satisfied. The night blurred after that. Not into anything explicit, no lines crossed too far, but into something deeper. Commands. Obedience. The rush of surrender. Ms. Carter tested me, pushing just far enough to make me tremble, to make me want more. Ms. Lane teased from the sidelines, her laughter a constant reminder that this wasn't just about one woman, it was about both. And me, caught between them. When they finally released me, I was shaking, not from fear, not even from what had happened, but from what hadn't yet. Because I knew this was only the beginning. As I walked home under the night sky, wrists still tingling from the silk, my mind spun. I should have been afraid. Instead, I felt alive. Hungry. Addicted. And certain of one thing. Whatever this was, I wasn't going to stop. The scarf still haunted me. It had been days since Ms. Carter tied my wrists, and yet the memory lingered like a brand. The pressure of silk against skin. The thrill of surrender. The way her voice slipped beneath my defenses and made obedience feel not like weakness, but release. I couldn't focus in class anymore. Could barely sleep. Every glance at her was a reminder. Every thought of her spun into something darker, hungrier. And then came the message. A single note slipped into my notebook, written in her neat, deliberate handwriting. Saturday. 8. Same address. Bring nothing but yourself. My hands trembled as I read it. Not from fear. From anticipation. When I arrived, the house was different. Candles burned low, casting golden light across the walls. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of wine and something more primal. Ms. Lane opened the door, barefoot this time, her smile slow and wicked. "You're late," she teased, though I wasn't. She tugged me inside by the wrist, her touch deliberate. In the living room, Ms. Carter stood waiting. She wore black again, simple, elegant, but with a severity that stole my breath. Her hair was loose for once, framing her face, making her look at once softer and infinitely more dangerous. Her eyes locked on mine. Kneel. The word hit me like a strike. My body moved before my mind could question, sinking to my knees on the rug. Ms. Lane chuckled, circling behind me. He's eager tonight. Good, Ms. Carter murmured. The next hour unfolded like a dream, no, like a carefully orchestrated trap. They moved around me in tandem, each playing a role. Ms. Carter, commanding, unyielding, testing me with words and commands that brooked no refusal. Ms. Lane, teasing, playful, brushing against me just enough to make me tremble, whispering temptations into my ear. Together, they unraveled me completely. At one point, Ms. Carter blindfolded me with the same silk scarf. Darkness swallowed the room, but their voices, their touches, their laughter painted everything in sharper colors. Do you trust us? Ms. Carter's voice asked from somewhere close. Yes. Say it again. Yes. Ms. Lane's breath brushed my neck, warm and taunting. He sounds so sweet when he begs. I wasn't begging, I managed, though my voice cracked. Her laugh was soft, knowing. Not yet. Time lost meaning. There were only sensations, silk against skin, wine on lips, the electric burn of anticipation as every boundary I thought I had blurred. At moments, Ms. Carter's hand would tilt my chin up, forcing me to answer her questions with brutal honesty. What I wanted. What I feared. Who I belonged to. At others, Ms. Lane's fingers would trail down my arm, light as a whisper, making me shiver with want. It was overwhelming, intoxicating, terrifying, and I wanted more. Finally, Ms. Carter pulled away the blindfold. The world swam back into focus, candlelight flickering, shadows dancing across their faces. Her gaze burned into mine. Do you understand now? I swallowed hard. Understand what? That control, she said softly, can be freedom. That surrender doesn't make you weak. It makes you honest. Her words sank into me like truth I had always known but never spoken. I nodded, breathless. Yes. Ms. Lane leaned down, brushing her lips close to my ear. Then say it. My throat tightened, but the words came. I'm yours. The rest of the night blurred into heat and sensation, their voices, their hands, their laughter. A threesome, yes, but more than that. A choreography of dominance and temptation, of obedience and reward. Ms. Carter set the pace, commanding with steady authority. Ms. Lane teased and coaxed, amplifying every nerve. Together, they pulled me deeper into a world I hadn't known existed, one where desire and discipline intertwined, where submission wasn't humiliation, but revelation. And me? I gave in. Fully. Without hesitation. Without regret. When dawn crept through the blinds, I lay there, exhausted, raw, but alive in a way I had never felt before. Ms. Lane dozed lightly on the couch, her smile still playful even in sleep. Ms. Carter sat in a chair, watching me, a glass of wine untouched in her hand. Her eyes met mine, steady, unreadable. "Now you understand," she said softly. I nodded. Words weren't enough. A faint smile touched her lips, the closest thing to tenderness I had seen from her. "This was only the beginning," she murmured. And I believed her.